NWA-TNA announced on its January 14th pay-per-view that Jonny Fairplay, real name John Dalton...
Kayfabe!
Oh, still rooting the fact that his name is not actually Jonny Fairplay.
Shoot trash.
Was debuting for the promotion on its January 21st show. Fairplay, who made a national name for himself on the top-rated broadcast network show Survivor, had signed with TNA just that evening after some final haggling over contractual details. The Dalton deal wasn't actually finalized until 7:30 p.m. the night of the show, so it's the classic TNA get the announcement over the line at the last minute and announce it on the show.
With that one I can kind of understand, because like it reads this way, but it could have just been like pen to paper on the day. Like everything else has actually been worked out, but we just need you in person.
No, apparently there was some like details that Fairplay was playing somewhat hardball, wanting money, and then Dixie was just like, give him what he wants.
Hell yeah, Dixie.
She wants her reality show stars all over her NWA-TNA, baby.
And to get followed on Twitter.
That's true. I'm surprised you didn't do the follow me on Twitter.
I don't think I have it in me.
How familiar are you with Survivor?
I've seen the show. I'm not familiar with like the famous heels and baby faces of Survivor, but I know like that there is a certain celebrity that comes with Survivor. I know the general gist of Survivor because I have seen it. That's about it, really.
Yeah, I consider myself, at least back in the day, a Survivor fan. It was one of the few shows that aired on our Irish language station over here, TG Car. So all of the interstitials were translated into Irish. So anytime I watched Survivor from the US, all of like the previously on Survivor and all that, and all of like the recaps would be in English, of course. And I'd be like, no, it's supposed to be in Irish.
Can you say previously on Survivor in Irish?
We air Survivor.
That's pretty sick.
I think that's it. Someone will correct me on that.
A better Irish will.
Oh, definitely. But yeah, I would have watched a bunch of Survivor through the years, many seasons of it. I like Survivor. I think it's a really good show and a pretty timeless format, which is the reason it is still around today after 20-odd years. A lot of those reality TV shows have burned out and gone away. You don't really see the real world anymore. Even if I probably check the Wikipedia page, it's probably still airing somewhere, but you don't hear a word about it. As opposed to Survivor, which still, you know, gets a network TV spot. It's still going pretty strong. And this was during like the heyday of Survivor, and Jonny Fairplay was a very famous villain on Survivor for a very good reason, in that he faked the death of his grandmother on Survivor for sympathy.
That rules.
And it's funny, it was a long play too, because the way they did it was like every season on Survivor after the merge, which is like a little over halfway through the show, they bring people's family members in for a nice little family reunion. But they do it every year. It's always halfway through the show, like maybe 3/4 of the way through the show, that they bring all those family members in for the reunion. So like he put this scheme in place hoping he would get this far. Like that's a long con. It's not just a regular con.
And then like he had to have faith in his friend, like being willing to commit to the bit to like actually go on the show and portray this.
Because if you actually watch the clip, his friend it comes on like little tentatively. I think you could see it in the friend's face that there's a little bit of like, are we actually doing this? And then like Jonny Fairplay's like, how's grandma? And then he's like, she's dead. And it's a big sad moment, and the entire crux of it is so that he gets to meet with his friend and have a lavish meal and a day away from like the horrors at camp. And Tribe has to vote on who gets to go away with their family member and have a meal away and a proper day away. And all of them are like, his grandma died. He needs to know the details.
I love the one woman who was like, I don't believe him.
Yeah, fuck this dude.
She rules. I was like a big fan of her. And like the one who was like so hook, line, and sinker on it too. And she's like, he lost his grandmother.
Oh, it's like literally, I hope the person who was like, no, he's fucking bullshitting, it like did the biggest victory lap of all time after that.
Yeah, 100%. I hope she did like many an interview.
Yeah, it turns out that like after that segment happened, like after they recorded it, like the Survivor crew called the Jonny Fairplay's family being like, oh, is there any way we can help? And his grandmother answered the phone.
I have no problem with this.
Listen, it's a dopey reality show. Go all in. If you're going to be the bad guy, go all in on being the bad guy.
I admire someone having the dedication to be this much of a bad guy.
It is like some sensational TV villainry. Like this is good stuff.
I want more of this.
So Fairplay will debut playing a similar character to that he orchestrated for Survivor. It must be noted, Fairplay came from wrestling first. Fairplay was trained as an indie wrestler in the late 90s. He was Roddy Piper's personal assistant, which we'll talk about more in a second, because they have a tumultuous relationship together.
This blows my mind, by the way.
weaving into a story that Jonny Fairplay learned from wrestling to go on and be an over-the-top heel on Survivor.
Well, you got to imagine like how it blew my mind when he was like working stuff in the ring, and I was like, holy shit, Jonny Fairplay, they had a lot of faith in this guy to go out there and take this shit.
And yeah, they've worked you on multiple levels then. This is like Survivor all over again. So he'll play a brash, unedited punk who thinks the world is his oyster and will do anything to advance. Fairplay and Jarrett had only talked once at the time of his signing, and his role hadn't been specified yet. There is skepticism within the locker room that he deserves what is likely a better financial deal than any of the wrestlers taking bumps for TNA each week. TNA is banking on Fairplay helping to draw pay-per-view buys and in general make the programs more entertaining. The deal is rumoured to be for 1 year, which means TNA is committed to Fairplay as more than just a celebrity novelty act making a handful of appearances. The Fairplay signing was written up in next week's National Enquirer. Other media entities have been sent press releases. TNA is hoping for a barrage of media mentions from signing Survivor's biggest villain probably up until that point, or at least one of them.
What are other famous Survivor villains?
Oh, there's the dude, I can't remember names. I'm terrible for names.
Well, tell me their bits. That's what I care about more anyway.
There's Richard Hatch, who went to jail after Survivor.
What did he do?
I think it was just some general tax fraud and tax evasion.
I don't care about... I want to see, like, what did they do on the shows that made them bad guys? What beats I faked my grandmother's death for sympathy?
Nothing. Nothing beats I faked my grandma's death for sympathy.
Well then, clearly this is the peak.
There's probably, like, better Survivor heels in terms of people being conniving, but in terms of, like, general schemes, there's nothing on this level. Because it's usually, like, you told me one thing and then you betrayed me. That's, like, usually the level of Survivor villainry. There's not usually, I faked my grandmother's death for sympathy to get one reward and hope that carries me all the way through to the rest of the show, and it didn't. And that's a level of Survivor villainry that is like leaps and bounds above. That is the outwit, outplay, outlast to a whole new level.
I like it.
So they were hoping to get a ton of media attention. They didn't. They got that National Enquirer release first, and there were some like media mentions, and Jonny Fairplay did Man Cow as well, so it was mentioned there. But other than that, it kind of just flew under the radar and didn't really achieve anything.
The fuck is a Man Cow?
He's a radio host. He was relatively famous. He probably still is around and relatively famous. So that's what I find with a lot of these radio hosts. I'm like, oh, they were famous like 20 years ago.
Thought this was a 90s WWF gimmick.
Man Cow, the Man Cow. It's the Minotaur's son, the Man Cow.
Yeah.
So they were hoping for a bunch of media appearances that did not come. They were hoping to get on Stern, but that didn't happen. And they just were left with Jonny Fairplay.
God, this like relationship with Stern is so funny and how they keep trying.
They desperately, desperately want to be mentioned on Howard Stern. Because, yeah, there was that story that they wanted to do a puppet against... What's the name of the dude on Stern? I don't even remember.
Beetlejuice?
Beetlejuice, yes. A puppet against Beetlejuice program to cross over with Stern.
Honestly, they should have, like, given him whatever he wanted for that deal. I said it at the time and I'll say it now. That probably would have, like, given them a bump that they would have hopefully been able to actually keep.
They should have booked Stern against Jonny Fairplay.
Yes.
The bulk of the locker room reaction to Fairplay's presence when he did show up was favourable. He seemed like a fan and didn't want to get any heat with the boys, said one wrestler. Another wrestler who was aware of Fairplay's reputation said he was also surprised by Fairplay. The quote, I was ready to slap him before I even met him, but he was very nice to everyone in the locker room. Wrestlers also say Fairplay was wise enough to introduce himself to everyone in the locker room rather than wait for them to approach him. Fairplay was said to appear somewhat intimidated prior to the show and came away very happy with his first performance.
And they're like, wow, how did this guy who trained to be a wrestler know the rules of being a wrestler?
Yeah, this dude who came up in the indies and promoted some shows. He wasn't just a random indie wrestler. He even like tried to have his own company at one stage. Somehow knew how to get away with like being respected in the locker room, which is just walk around and shake some people's hands. That's apparently like that's the only thing you need to do in wrestling.
I'm so like devastated. Like, listen, I don't think I ever thought it was his real name, but the fact that like I was like, oh, do they do gimmick names on Survivor? So I was like 50-50 on it, and I'm really disappointed that Jonny Fairplay wasn't the name of a guy who faked his grandmother's death in Survivor.
It would have been spectacular, wouldn't it?
And like, just the wrestling like ramifications from this, like, you can have a Fairplay's Industries that's about a cheating heel stable, that's perfect, come on.
It is, like, we'll talk about it when we get into the shows, where I think, actually, no, let's do it now. Let's do Jonny Fairplay now.
Sure.
Because he has 2 segments on the show, the first of which is his debut where he comes to the ring with Don Callis. And I thought he was pretty good.
Yeah, he just did like sticky heel stuff, but like it was good.
Yeah, so like he comes out with Dawn, and you know he is doing the classic. It reminds me a lot of the AJ Styles and Vince Russo stuff when AJ first turned heel, where he's doing the "I'm from a civilized part of the world and this is the South."
Yeah, he does like basic heel shtick, but it's great. He was actually the only one who was like confident enough to interact with the crowd.
Yeah, because we'll talk about it when we get further into the shows, but this is also a very heavily involved ICP month, the Insane Clown Posse. So they were a bunch of ICP fans in the crowd who would routinely chant ICP during the show.
Garrett. We can't say ICP fans. If we're talking about them, we have to call them juggalos.
I'm very, very amused to learn that you were actually a juggalo.
I'm not. I wouldn't define myself as a juggalo, but I am familiar with the rap group ICP.
Oh, so you're just going to call yourself an ICP fan then, are you?
No, yeah, there's a difference, okay? The people who were in that crowd were above ICP fans.
All right, there are a bunch of juggalos in the crowd for the ICP who were there that month, and they would routinely chant ICP during the show, which they did during this promo, because Jonny Fairplay was like, I'm more famous than all the wrestlers, I'm more famous than a bunch of people he named, and they started chanting ICP, and then he turned to the crowd and it's like, I'm sure as hell more famous than those guys.
Which, by the way, isn't true. If everyone was like, when they fired back with, who are you? And he's just like, ask my grandma. And I was like, ooh.
And again, AJ comes out because the first confrontation is with AJ. And again, like the crowd starts chanting, who are you? And he just looks at AJ and points. It's like, they're talking to you.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's all pretty good stuff. So yeah, he comes out, he does that promo. AJ cuts him off. They do a little brawl. He tries to hit AJ with a chair. AJ refers to him as Carrot Top. So that's a timely reference.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he tries to hit AJ with a chair. AJ turns about and power bombs him as hard as I think AJ Styles has ever power bombed anybody.
Yeah, it would look great.
There was some criticism, and I kind of get it, about the idea of power bombing Jonny Fairplay on the first night. The whole idea is this guy is this heel who you want to see get his comeuppance, and AJ fucking killed him on the first night.
Yeah, you could have built to that, I'm sure.
I'd imagine Fairplay, probably part of that is him wanting to seem like one of the boys, him wanting to seem like he's not above this. So he's like, yeah, I'll take a big ass powerbomb, sure.
Wants to earn his stripes.
And then the second segment of the month, there was a whole thing about Brian Urlacher was there to support Don Callis in a main event match we'll talk about later. Chicago Bears linebacker and man with bad takes in recent years was there. So the gimmick was that he was banned from the building and they wanted to kick him out so that he couldn't involve himself in the Eric Watts versus Don Callis match. And Jonny Fairplay and the Red Shirt Security were the ones that were doing that to try and remove him and Don Callis.
But as things did not go well for Jonny Fairplay on this one. He took 2 big bumps in a row.
Yeah, he sure did. So Don Callis was like, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Urlacher was like, what's the hard way? They tried to jump him. He clotheslined the Red Shirt Security and then press slammed Jonny Fairplay from the ring to the floor onto the Red Shirt Security.
I like the Red Shirts leaving with Fairplay just strung over their back.
Yeah. And there was also a sit-down interview with Mike Tenay where he was like, that's where they got into the stuff with Piper, because Piper fired Fairplay as his personal assistant after Fairplay was behind the wheel of a car wreck that left Piper hospitalized a few years ago, and Piper apparently blamed him for that. He literally said he tried to kill me.
I'm sure they were happy to be around each other somewhat.
So yeah, they want to build potentially to a Fairplay against Piper match.
Like, I don't know, that's like, there's a cool story there, I guess, but it's like, is anyone actually going to pay for this?
No one wants, especially after he's gotten his comeuppance twice. He's been freaking powerbombed to hell by AJ and pressland by Brian Urlacher. Do I want to watch him wrestle Roddy Piper? Not a chance in hell.
The way you probably do this is you have them like have a representative of each, and you have Jonny Fairplay escape old comeuppance, and then eventually they do the whole like, you beat my guy, but your guy, get a minute with the other guy, and then boom, 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 boom. Which is what they just did with Raven and the Suppers on the New Church, so we know that they can do it.
And I don't think for a second that the Jonny Fairplay against Roddy Piper, like 5-minute match or whatever, it would be nearly as good as the Raven against James Mitchell one was.
No, but hey, if they had built to that moment where Roddy lays him out.